3 will begin shortly. Your live interactive coverage with CBS 13 and Fox 23 starts right now.
And welcome, everybody. It's time for a CBS 13, Fox 23, and Bangor Daily News discussion on Election Day. Here it is, folks. After all these months and weeks of discussion and debate over all these referendum questions, we have come to voting day, and we've got a little more than 10 minutes left in the vote. I'm joined by Mike Shepard from the political editor of the Bangor Daily News, our media partners, of course. And on the road and in the field right now, we have our Brad Rogers and Dan Lamparello. They're covering question 3 for us tonight. And we're going to start our conversation, I think, around question 3. And let's start with Dan. Let's start with you, because I know you're outside of the Yes on 3 campaign. And for those who are sort of getting us up to speed, and I'd imagine anyone watching us right now is up to speed on the fact that question 3 is the one that's had the most heat around it, the most charged issue, as it were, involving the future of electricity in Maine. And Dan, you're outside of and we should make it clear, obviously, there's still time to vote. So if you live within 10 minutes of a polling place, you can still make it. If not, it's probably too late for you. Anyway, Dan, obviously question 3, $35 million spent on the yes side on this. I'm sorry, on the no side on this. The yes side dwarfed by that, only had about $1 million to spend. Is there a lot of talk about that disparity out in the field so far today?
No, I mean, the Pine Tree Power folks, the question 3, yes on question 3 folks, have said from the beginning that they're a grassroots campaign, if you will. They were focusing a lot on word of mouth, on social media advertising, all those types of things. So you never really saw the ads like you did on our air constantly from the no campaign. So like you said, I mean, I think the word dwarfed is a good way to talk about it, Gregg. But they still seem pretty confident that their word of mouth grassroots campaign can have a successful night. But again, I mean, this push has been going on since 2019 when it all started in the legislature. It ended up being vetoed in 2021 by Governor Janet Mills. And that's when the supporters thought that it would be best to take it to a referendum. So it'll be interesting to see tonight if money plays the role that it has over the airwaves, or if this grassroots campaign can actually, push their message through word of mouth and social media.
And we've got Brad Rogers. He's at the No on 3 campaign. By the way, I should point out both the Yes on 3 and the No on 3 campaigns are headquartered in Portland tonight. And Brad, you've been talking with folks from No on 3. And as we mentioned, CMP, their parent company, Versant, their parent company, have put a lot of money into this campaign to try and get a no vote across the finish line.
Yeah, they really have. You think about the months and months of television ads that we've been seeing here. They're drumming home those same messages. It's too costly for Maine. $13.5 billion is going to cost, and Mainers are going to be on the hook for it. The other message, of course, that there's no plan, that they say Pine Tree Power has no plan to keep the lights on. Another message they keep drumming home with these political ads. And then the other one, of course, too, that they're talking about is this is going to lead to costly and years, perhaps years or even decades of litigation, because the parent companies of CMP and Versant, they're not going to go down willingly. They're going to fight this if somehow Pine Tree Power wins tonight, which again, when you look at all the political ads and the polling, it's a tough hoe for them to run.
And Mike Shepard, political editor of the Bangor Daily News, joining us as well. And Mike, again, your team has covered this extensively as well. Hard not to. I mean, this is the issue that's been 4 years really in the making to get it to this point to the ballot. And here we are, again, with about 7 minutes left of voting, 6 minutes left of voting at this point. What's your take on where this stands and what's at stake?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brad summed it up pretty well. This is a David and Goliath battle, and it looks like Goliath is about to win, right? CMP and Versant have sunk so much money into this, run such a much more visible campaign, right? Really hammered home the $13.5 billion figure that the utilities estimate it would take to buy their infrastructure out. And I think what we've seen on the other side is, they don't have enough money to get their message out, right? And there are lots of questions that are open about this proposal. The public advocate Bill Harwood came out to say this is going to spend, probably between 5 and 10 years in court. There's no guarantee that reliability, affordability will improve. And I think when we've been talking to voters out there in the field today, and it's just we've run into. I've looked over the responses that our reporters have submitted, and you see I don't like CMP, but or there's uncertainty here, and I think we should just stick with what works and try to fix it. So I agree with Brad. I think this is going down tonight, and but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, no. And again, we can maybe talk a little bit about question one because by the way, we're coming up on 5 minutes. I know Dan and Brad have to probably leave us here in a moment because they're going to duck in and start covering these watch parties for the yes side and the no side on question three. But I pulled up the Bangor Daily News website here, on this. And I mean, this whole, we've talked about it, Dan and Brad as well, this $13.5 billion figure. I mean, it's hotly disputed how much this is going to cost. And yet it's what I think that, I mean, the ads are a big part of it. A big part of what this is what people are thinking about. Like we just heard it today. The message has been really on point from the no side saying that they want, that this is going to be a burden on people. And Brad mentioned the potential litigation. Dan, what have you heard as far as them trying to counter that message today?
Well, they've just been pushing the fact that they believe that this will save ratepayers money. But I think Mike summed it up really well, is that there's just so many unknowns. I mean, the special that we did back a month and a half ago pointed out the fact that even though the $13.5 billion number is out there, we don't even know if that's accurate. It's going to take years in court, years of litigation, and CMP and Versant are not going to just come to the table if this all of a sudden passed and be like, okay, we're just going to, give up on this. There is going to be a lengthy process to try to figure out what that real number is for all of CMP and Versant's assets, because we have to be honest. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of miles of poles, hundreds of transformers across the state. There's utility trucks, buildings, computers. There's so much more to that number than people actually think about. And I think the unknowns, like Mike said, are what really may sink this tonight, because people in this state want to know a guarantee. Am I going to save money on this? And truthfully, there is no consensus on if that's true.
Yeah, there's
even all the analysis that's been done by so many.
There's like three of them, right? On what
there were four.
That's right. There was a fourth.
Paid for by CMP's parent company. One was done by the state, but the I believe it was the Lincoln analysis, which was the first one done by PUC, was what Bill Harwood came out with in the end too. That this, in the short term, will probably cost more money, and in the long term, which we don't know how long that long term will be, could save ratepayers money in the end. But again, everyone's conflicted. There's so many unknowns. And I think in the end, that could be the downfall of this tonight.
And Brad, before I let you and Dan go here, this is obviously the no side, though, has been hammering the point of saying, the fact this is risky. But how have they pushed back on the idea that so many people are frankly not happy with CMP, especially? I mean, Versant, I know, and maybe Mike, you can speak to that in a moment, from what the folks in the former Bangor hydro area are, think about Versant. But Brad, that's one of the things that the no side has really had to push back on is, this idea that they've done a bad job. And quite frankly, the utilities haven't made themselves really available during this process. We've really been speaking with people on the campaign, the surrogates, rather than hearing directly necessarily from CMP when it comes to this.
Yeah, in fact, I heard from CMP just a few days ago. They might release a statement tonight, but they aren't ready to talk publicly, probably for maybe 2 or 3 days after this is even over with. So we won't maybe even hear from them tonight as well. But I think both Dan and Mike make excellent points. Though, if you really think about it, it is those unknowns that is really what is going to perhaps lead to the failure of this referendum, because there's just so many people are like, it's too risky. We just don't know.
And to counter that, Greg, you did ask the question of how is the yes side trying to counter the messaging, the powerful messaging from the two utilities and their campaigns. And they're really pushing the fact that, yes, well, if this were to pass, there isn't a day one change that's going to happen. They still feel like they have the groundwork written in this lengthy legislation that goes a lot further than the question that you saw on the ballot today. There's a whole 20-page piece of legislation that talks about the transition process and how the board gets elected and all that. They feel there is a plan in place to get this done if this were to pass.
And Dan and Brad, before we let you go, give us a sum up of what we can expect to see tonight and the coverage that people can expect to get on CBS 13 and Fox 23. Dan, let's go ahead and start with you because I know you got to jump inside.
Sure. Yeah, we'll be at our Arcadia, which is the arcade bar downtown. That's where Question 3 supporters will be gathering tonight. So we'll have reaction from them starting right at the top of our 10 o'clock newscast on Fox 23. And we'll be checking in and out as those results come in throughout tonight to get their reaction.
And we're at a downtown hotel. They've asked us not to release the identity of the hotel. I don't want to be associated with
secret location.
one of these campaigns and get some bad blood. But yeah, the no on one people, and I'm sure the yes on one people, they're both out campaigning to the last, ditch effort. So nobody's even here right now. We expect them to maybe come in around 8:30, 8 or 8:30, start trickling in. But they're out working still, and doing exit polling and all sorts of things.
Yeah, a lot of work on election night. And we should mention, I believe we've come up on 8 o'clock on the dot here on Election Day 2023. And as we know, this is the time in which polls across the state are closing. We also know that if you're in line to vote, they won't kick you out. They'll make sure you get a chance to vote. Brad and Dan, let's go ahead and let you go. I know you guys have got a long night ahead of you on coverage for CBS 13 and Fox 23. We'll see you back on air later in the evening.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, Mike. And to the viewers at home, I had the Bangor Daily News website open here for a moment, and I saw Mike chuckle because he realized I forgot to log in. So I hit the paywall there.
You hit the paywall. Anyway, it's a bad mistake to make. Don't make that at home.
Yeah, don't make that mistake at home. Yeah. But Mike, the point I was making a moment ago, again, we've been talking about Question 3 because that's where a lot of the heat in this election has been centered. So let me ask you that question I was starting to ask, which is, does Versant feel like they're sort of being sucked into this because of the bad blood that CMP might have?
Yeah, I think if you talk to people around Versant, let's get one thing straight here. Both utilities have polled poorly, right? They've both been on the bottom of the JD Power rankings in the region. Versant is a relatively new utility, right? This was Bangor Hydro before. A lot of people will know it as that. But both utilities have scored poorly. CMP has been the most high profile. You go back all the way back to 2017 customer service billing issues. I think that Versant has felt that CMP, right, is dragging them down a little bit, right, when it comes to their reputations. So I think there's maybe some truth to that. You may be letting them skate a little bit by saying that, but I think that's the ball game here. And I think you can go all the way back to the corridor and another string of political issues, right, that have stemmed basically from dissatisfaction with CMP. And I think this is pretty fairly represented as one of those.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And it's like, again, I think CMP is what, 4 times not quite 4 times the coverage area of Versant, maybe about 3 times anyway. This is a big deal. I mean, again, the bottom line for folks who are tuning in, and first of all, we really appreciate you tuning in. And I'll go ahead and ask if you're watching us right now, where are you watching from? Let us know. Jump in on the comments. We'll try and share some of those comments. We do already have some comments coming in, just to pass them along here, Mike. We have, Kim saying, she's pointing out, for example, maybe this is a place we should take it. Question 1. Kim mentions question 1 is from CMP in case question 3 fails. Let's go ahead and segue to that. And I'm going to then bring in Mal Meyer talking about question 4 here in a moment. But let's get this question from Kim out of the way. Not really a question. She's making a fair statement. CMP put question 1 on the ballot, which says if you, and it's very specific, if you're a utility, or a public owned utility going to spend more than $1 billion or raise $1 billion in public funds or more, you need to get a separate vote. So question 1 was kind of a that was put on there by the parent companies of the utilities.
Right. It's actually the other way around. It's in case question 3 succeeds.
Succeeds.
Right?
That's what I meant to say.
If people vote yes on 3, this was CMP's opportunity to give themselves another whack at this with the voters. Essentially, if question 3 passes and if question 1 passes, the voters would have to vote again on the total sum of borrowing. So what we think is going to happen, right, is that question 3 is going to fail tonight. Which would make question 1 more or less irrelevant. Like there's no other agency that's out there that's really going to ever borrow this much money. So you can kind of, if question 3 were to pass, you definitely want to watch the outcome of question 1. If question 3 goes down as we expect it to, you really don't have to pay any attention to question 1. It's kind of a funny situation.
As far as we know, it'll be moot because again, it's narrowly written to being this sort of public power takeover situation. All right, and hello to Carrie. She chimed in as I asked where people are watching from. So thanks, Carrie, for chiming in. Let's go ahead and bring Mal Meyer into the conversation right now. Mal is joining us. He's been covering the question 4 issue as we pivot now to the right to repair, as it's called. Now, you've been covering this for a while now, this for us here at CBS 13. This is actually an issue where, on the face of it, I know a lot of people are thinking, yeah, I want to be able to have my mechanics fix my car. But there's a lot of details in there about the telematics, the wireless data that comes to our cars. But go ahead and set the table for us, Mal, now that the polls have closed. What's the issue here? And what are people voting on in question 4 today?
Yeah, so basically what it comes down to is for a lot of the different independent auto shops and stuff that I've been talking to, they're concerned as cars get more high tech, if you will, that they will become harder and harder to work on. So right now, as it's been explained to me, they have different, companies and stuff that are able to get kind of the software information and some of the critical information that they need in order to diagnose problems that you might come in with your car. They are able to get that information from these automakers. Now, the concern is that in the future that certain automakers might say, we are actually not going to share that at all, regardless of the price that you might be willing to pay for that information in order to do those services. And already at least one independent shop that I talked to today said, there are already certain automakers that we just can't get this information from. So when these kinds of cars come in, we really don't know, necessarily maybe how to fix the problem that's wrong with your car. So that's kind of where this issue stems from, is just really worrying about as time goes on that these cars will be harder and harder to fix. And so if the information isn't shared, then they're worried that basically only the dealerships will be able to fix your cars, putting independent shops essentially out of business.
Yeah. And you talked to an independent shop owner, I think either today or yesterday or within the last few days, who basically made the analogy that a car these days is like a computer on 4 wheels. They're increasingly sophisticated.
Yeah, that's exactly how Paulin's put it. And they have a number of shops right around kind of like the Portland area, southern Maine area. So, they said essentially, we'll be okay. They do also tire work and stuff like that. Obviously, that is still a big part of their business, right, to work on cars. So, they say, we might be okay in the future, but some of these other stores that really do just focus on fixing cars and doing that kind of work, this might really, really significantly impact them.
How about your take, Mike? I know you guys have been covering this extensively as well. Question 3, obviously with all the ads, everything else. And by the way, for those who are on our live stream, kind of, if you want us to pivot back to question 3, if that's what you're saying in the comments, we can obviously do that, but we wanted to cover as much ground as we can in this conversation. Mike, question 4, you guys have covered this as well. What's your read on it? Oh, we may have lost your audio, or I'm not hearing you. Mal, are you hearing Mike right now?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there you are. He's back.
Yeah, question 4 is almost certainly going to pass. The public polling was very strong, upward of 75%. It also passed by a similar margin down in Massachusetts. So it would be the first state to adopt. It would be the second state after them to adopt such a law. It's fraught with complications, though. I think we just saw that. I said it was passed in 2020. But it was only implemented by the state back in June, and there are some lingering issues there from it. Subaru and Kia, for instance, have on new models, the newest models have essentially disabled these telematic systems. So there's going to be, and there's still an ongoing court case about whether or not that's constitutional. The automakers say it's not. So this is a law that it's a really interesting topic. It's one that affects a lot of our pocketbooks. A lot of us have garages that we go to regularly, especially in rural places, right, where it's just harder to get any kind of service. So we'll see. This is going to pass. I think we haven't heard the last of it. This is going to be something that we're all following for months and maybe years before this is really fully implemented, if ever.
Well, go ahead, Mel.
I'll chime in on this point, because I talked to a state representative from South Berwick yesterday, and she actually has been vocally against this question. Part of the key points for her really in stating her opposition to this was just the fact that it has been tied up in litigation in Massachusetts. So the problem with that is, right, the Attorney General's office would have to, see that through essentially, and she was concerned about the cost to taxpayers if that does go to litigation, how long that could take. And another point that she made was, at least from her standpoint, she was thinking that there was lawmakers who would be potentially open to addressing some of these issues through specific legislation, should that be presented.
And we should point that out. I mean, for those who've been covering politics in Maine for a long, long time, like I have, it used to be that a citizens initiative that passed was frankly like a sacred cow. You wouldn't change it. It was viewed as being sacrosanct. I think that's changed. And I think we saw, for example, when the racinos, the casinos first started passing, we're like, okay, the voters passed this, but we're going to change it. And I think, Mal, what you're saying here is that should question 4 pass, I think that the lawmakers are open to the idea that, hey, maybe even if it passes, we're not going to necessarily stay as is. We may change some of it.
Yeah. So it's tough to say. If there, I'm not necessarily super familiar if there were specific legislations that's come up in the past that kind of could get at some of these issues that some of these independent stores are fighting for, if you will, in this particular question. It's tough to say necessarily, but I do know that the representative said that there was some sort of legislation that during this upcoming session, which will start back up in January, when lawmakers return back to Augusta, it sounds like they kind of put something off until then, not knowing how this would kind of shake out. So they were kind of looking to see what necessarily happened with this particular question.
Yeah, good point. And I want to say somebody else chimed in on this. It'll show. Nate chiming in saying that there's a lot of stuff. This is kind of what Mal and Mike and I were just talking about. There is a lot obviously going on behind the scenes on question 4, that might involve litigation, that might involve tweaking, as Nate calls it here, some unintended consequences. Thank you, Nate, for chiming in on that. And I think that's an important point. That's something to watch. I think Mike's actually right. I think that all the polling indicates this is going to pass. But I think we haven't heard the last of it if and when it does pass tonight. Getting some questions in. Let's go ahead and pop this one up. And Mal, actually, I know you're. Before I get to Tim, hold on there, Weeks. Tim, hold on with your thought there for a second. Mal, let's get it. I'm going to let you go here in a second. Give us a preview. What should people expect from our coverage tonight when it involves question 4, both on air and online?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Greg? What
should people expect from your coverage tonight? I know we'll see it on Fox 23 News at 10 and 11, right? So where are you at with question 4? You're sort of roaming? Where are you at?
So right now we're actually by the highway.
Since it involves cars, that's a good place.
Right by cars. We've been talking to different automotive repair shops, especially over the last 2 days leading up to the election. And then again today, I'm talking to them. We talked to some voters over in South Portland, what they were thinking about in terms of, what they've been hearing, especially from the Yes on 4 campaign, because we kind of talked about, there was a lot of spending that actually went into this. Nothing in comparison to something like question 3, right? But still a lot of money that was put up for this, largely on supporting question 4. I think a lot of us, have seen those kind of ads on TV. I know that a lot of their money was spent on television ads versus opposing question 4 that was largely spent on ads online and on social media to pose that. But I don't know how familiar people may have been or seen some of those ads out there. So yeah, we're just going to be talking to that. And I know there is a watch party as well for the Yes on 4 campaign. So we will be kind of touching base with them once those results start to kind of trickle in.
All right. Mal Meyer joining us live in our Facebook Live conversation on our website. Mal, I'm going to let you go because I know you got some coverage to do ahead tonight. So appreciate your time, Mal.
Sounds good. Thanks, Greg.
All right. See you soon. All right. Hey, folks. So I'm going to get to some of these questions, Mike, that that we see. Like I said, I promised Tim was asking about question 6. We also have somebody asking about the mayoral races happening in obviously Lewiston and in Portland right now. And then this is always a key question as I click away something else that's blocking my screen for a moment. Nicholas asking how long it may take to get some results. Maybe we should take Nicholas's question first. I think and it sort of bleeds into one of the question from Tyler about the mayor race. I know for almost a fact that the Portland mayoral results will probably not be tonight. In fact, I think the candidates have already said they do not expect it to be tonight. But what do you think about results, especially in an off-year election? Historically, I think they do come in usually pretty quickly. Usually by mid to late evening, we do start having some pretty strong results.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at our page right now, and we're seeing some of the first results to roll in. So it's already happening. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends. I think what you need to remember is that the way we sort of call the outcomes of races, right, is if we start to see patterns in the data, right, if things are tracking in one direction or another, we have enough votes to call these races.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make these calls relatively quickly. I think you'll start to see some within the 9 o'clock hour, even on some of these. Now, it really depends on what the margins are, right?
Right.
If we see that there's a really strong pattern on like right to repair referendum question 4, for example, I think we'll be able to make that call relatively quickly if it really is going to be up at 75% like we think it will be. So that's going to come.
Yeah.
That's going to come quickly. It's going to be in the closer the race, the harder it is to call, right? So I think
Exactly.
I think most of these will be decided between, let's say, 9:30 and 11:30. But
I think that's right.
I could reverse myself if
no, you gave yourself a good range there, I think, for Nicholas's sake too. I think that's about right. I think that some of those are, with the exception of the Portland mayoral race, which I do think is going to be tomorrow at the earliest, and more likely later in the week. I mean, that's just history. There are five candidates. It seems really unlikely that we're going to get those results. I'll go ahead and pop up Tyler's question since I just pivoted to time in the mayoral races. It seems really unlikely that we're going to get that with 5 candidates, and it's that somebody's going to get to 50% plus 1 vote and not need to go to the next choice.
Yeah, I think we'll know the first round winner. It's really more about when the city decides to run that ranked choice tabulation.
I think that's correct.
I know they've done it. They've done it the night of in the past. So I think we've got to figure out when they're going to be done counting the first round votes, and then. Yep. It really doesn't take them long. It's only one city. They don't have to go back and recount anything.
Well, having said that, though, Mike, the only variable that we've heard and seen in the past is the islands. Quite frankly, sometimes there can be a little bit of a delay, understandably, as they try and literally put physical ballots and those little memory sticks onto the boat and bring it over to City Hall. That can take a little bit of time. Getting them in from Long Island and Peaks and that sort of thing. So that's the only caveat to. Being able to count quickly tonight. But I agree with you. I think we could get the first round results tonight. And I think it's almost impossible that it's going to be over without ranked choice. So I think that's, to sum up the Portland mayoral race. How about the Lewiston mayoral race? And the interesting thing here too, interesting isn't even the right word, Mike, is the backdrop. There was a really contentious politics happening in the Lewiston Auburn area, in the last weeks leading up to the election. And I feel like the tenor just changed. Not the importance of these races, but the tenor with what the tragedy that happened, almost 2 weeks ago tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, these were really interesting races that were really fraught. I mean, the Lewiston City Council has a conservative majority and a Democratic mayor. These are all nonpartisan offices, of course, but partisan politics is definitely a part of it. Mayor Carl Shaleen is on a ballot with three other people, including former Republican State Representative John Connor, who probably has the best chance to knock him off tonight. The interesting thing about Lewiston, however, is they do ranked choice voting, but in a different way. It's if nobody gets to 50% in that 4-candidate race, they go to a runoff in December, and this has happened many times before in Lewiston. So we may not actually have an outright winner in Lewiston. So it's going to be interesting to see whether we get there. And Auburn is almost the same. I mean, this is a place where politics has stopped essentially for 2 weeks since the shootings. And the night of the shooting, Jason Levesque was helping to stand up a place for victims to
the reunification center that they set up at the middle school.
Right. So I mean, this really affected both cities almost equally in terms of the response. So Councilor Leroy Walker, who's on the ballot, his son died. He was a manager at Smenji's, the bar that was hit by the shooter. So I mean, excuse me, really, this was a huge impact on both communities. So we'll see tonight how turnout looked good today, but we'll see what the results look like.
We'll see what the results. Yeah, and again, I'd like to send our thoughts out to the folks. And I know that there was we talked to some voters there today, and there were some folks basically talking about even a little bit of anxiety around just being in a crowded public place again. I know we had the Battle of the Bridge football game and some other things, and certainly vigils. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely there's a long road to healing there. So we want to acknowledge that for our friends in Lewiston tonight and surrounding communities, Lisbon, Auburn, everyone, Saginaw County, much of Androscoggin County, who had to deal with all that. I sort of put Tim on hold here, so let's go ahead and work our way back to Tim here. He asked about question 6. Question 6 is again the constitutional amendment that involves actually printing the entire Constitution. For some reason in the 1870s, we stopped doing that. It's somewhat lost to history as to why that happened. There's speculation that it was that they didn't want to bother with it. There's also speculation from some that it was, it may have been anti-Maine's tribes, because a lot of the language they stripped out of the Constitution, that's not, let's be clear here, folks, it's not out of the Constitution. It's still there. It's stripped out of what's printed. And that's, I've pulled up our website, which has basically shows the wording of the question, and some other factoids around question 6. But it's interesting there. I mean, here we are, it's technically a constitutional amendment, but it's not amending anything really, other than saying, hey, let's print the whole thing. And it's not, I should be clear, Mike, it's not just, most of it's tribal. There are some other elements in there too.
Yeah, right. This has gotten attention because the tribes have called for it, and essentially what it does is it prints these historic treaties between the state and the tribes. And in 1876, lawmakers made a bunch of changes. They essentially just shrunk the printed document. The stated reason at the time was to make it more readable and to take sort of archaic language out. And there's a really fraught history between the state and tribes as well. There have been some really sinister things that state lawmakers did in the ensuing period to try to get out of obligations to the tribe. So we don't know exactly what the motive for this was back in 1876, but it has been lumped in right to the larger tribal rights discussion in Maine. It's sort of a lesser item of it, but it's still an important part. What's interesting about this one is that Governor Jana Mills was very much against it, right? She issued through her top lawyer, she issued a pretty scathing take on this one, said it would be confusing. But this one looks like this one looks more likely than not to pass tonight. And it will be a boon to tribes that have struggled to get momentum behind some of their bigger goals in Augusta.
Yeah. And these, in the language there, and the treaties, I mean, these treaties actually predate Maine in many regards. They were signed and struck between the Wabanaki peoples and the state of Massachusetts prior to 1820. And of course, as we all know, 1820 is when, Maine separated from Massachusetts. And as part of that, we took on their treaty obligations. And it became enshrined in the Maine Constitution because of that. So that's why question 6, and I've heard more than one voter ask, why are we even voting on this? I don't quite get this. And there are several constitutional questions in there that have to do with obviously there's a question involving mental health. There's several issues in there that I feel like when people read the entire thing, for example, I'm going to read question 7 as I jump down. Do you favor amending the Constitution of Maine to remove a provision requiring a circulator of a citizen's initiative or people's veto petition to be a resident of Maine and a registered voter in Maine, requirements that have been ruled unconstitutional in federal court? I mean, that's a mouthful. It's very legalese. But I think that last part of the sentence, it's been ruled unconstitutional in federal court. And, so I think some people have asked, well, why are we voting on this at all? If it's unconstitutional, okay, why? Or if it's unconstitutional, let's just pass the thing, whatever,
Well, yeah.
it's
I mean,
interesting.
and there are two questions actually like this on the ballot today.
Yeah.
And what the funny thing about them is whether you pass it or not, nothing really changes because judges have already ruled the areas of law corresponding to two questions unconstitutional. So we're not going to be able to enforce this law, and we haven't been enforcing it since 2001 anyway. So it's just one of those things that it's still, because it's in the Constitution, lawmakers want us to clean it up, and that's the reality here. It's a dead part of a living document, and this is just the only process you have to go through to get that cleaned up. These things are here because bipartisan majority of the legislature wanted us to fix them, and now it's our job to decide by a simple majority.
Yep. So that's where we're at on a lot of those. That was question 8 that involved a similar issue involving guardianship. Those who are under guardianship not being able to vote for governor, senators, representatives, which the United States District Court for the District of Maine found violates the U.S. Constitution and federal law. So, we're being asked as voters today to sort of clean up some of this stuff. Is what some of these questions are. Let's see if there's one we haven't really talked about. Question 5 has to do with workload for the Secretary of State's office. But one that I find is interesting, let's move up here. It's question 2 we haven't touched on, so I want to real quickly. And it does have to do a little bit with, frankly, question 1 and question 3. And it talks about whether or not you want to ban foreign governments and entities that own, control, or influence from making contributions or financing communications for or against candidates about questions. Okay, on the surface, this is like, oh, do I want foreign governments to get out of Maine politics? Sure. And by the way, foreign governments already cannot give money to individual candidates under the law, but they can currently give money to referendum campaigns and even spark them. And this is relevant. Why? Well, because, for example, Avangrid is and CMP is owned by Avangrid, and Avangrid is owned by a wholly owned subsidiary that's owned by a European company. And I believe, if you trace upwards from Versant, it's a similar issue. So these are foreign-owned companies ultimately, and this is an effort to ban them from being able to basically put money into campaigns. And the argument on the other side is going to be like, hey, wait a minute, folks, we're going to have all these Maine is very active when it comes to referenda. Are we going to tell businesses that might be in the line of fire, as it were, for a referendum campaign that they can't put money in to defend themselves? So that's sort of the battle. Question 2 is kind of a sneaky one in terms of there's a lot at stake there potentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a Russian nesting doll, right? There's a lot of things that you have to peel back here. And first off, I would say this is probably going to pass. The polling on this has been really good, despite concerns from Governor Janet Mills, right, that this is unconstitutional. And I think you put that well, Greg. I mean, this is really targeted at the utilities. CMP's ultimate parent company in Iberdrola of Spain is partially owned by the governments of Qatar and Norway, and it's even more direct with Versant. They're owned by a company whose sole shareholder is the city of Calgary in Alberta, Canada. So and this really goes back to the corridor debate again when Hydro-Quebec got involved and was spending a lot of money on behalf of that project. Of course, they're owned by the province of Quebec. So again, this is this would really change utility politics at a time when we're really putting a lot of questions on the ballot that put utilities on the defensive. So their arguments, CMP says it may not be affected by this, but that's definitely an open question. But it would at least take 2 of those entities that we just described, Versant and Hydro-Quebec, off the table in politics at a time when when the legislature and the people are targeting legislation kind of at their entire business. Right. So it's and that's the slippery slope argument, right, that Janet Mills has used and other people who have opposed this. To full disclosure, 2 press groups, including the Maine Press Association, which represents newspapers, including mine, and the Maine Association of Broadcasters, which represents stations, including yours. They oppose this as well. Because there are some elements in here that make news outlets kind of enforce the provisions of this law. When we get an op-ed or when you get an advertisement, we have to be the ones that would ultimately kind of figure out, right, who was this
who's the ultimate owner here? Yeah,
exactly. Right, and there's some sort of government press concerns about that. Our groups actually think it violates the First Amendment. So we actually might be, essentially we, right, might be some of the parties to a lawsuit over this.
That's true.
So, talk about messy. None of us really want to be in court or be the story, but that's where we may be.
And I reduced this. This has been our website. I appreciate everyone. I welcome you to go throughout the evening to WGME.com and the BangorDailyNews.com, which, because I have not put in my login yet, I haven't been able to log into yet. But anyway, and I sort of I want to reduce this because I'm getting tired of looking at this guy, frankly, on this ad. So I didn't block the paywall before I shared. So sorry to this gentleman on the Fisher Investments ad, but we're going to remove him here from our live stream and move on. Hey, Mike, with the time we've got left, I think we should wrap up. I appreciate you, by the way, on a busy night, spending so much time with us. But give us an idea of the type of coverage you expect. And again, for those who are just joining us, we're not expecting results immediately, but they should start coming in fairly soon as we're coming up to the 8:30. Maybe in another hour or so, we might be getting to a point where we may get some projections, quite frankly. But what should people look for with the Bangor Daily News' coverage tonight? I know you guys are great at getting pumping in a lot of data and numbers as they come in.
Yeah, I mean, we've already got about, looks like 2,400, 2,500 votes in. So yeah, we tend to report pretty quickly from especially more rural, far-flung areas in our sort of legacy coverage area. You'll see a map and you'll see returns all the way down to the local level. You can type in your town and see how your races are going. So yeah, we're going to be all over the big races and some of the small ones. We've got reporters, in Lewiston and Auburn tonight, and we've been talking to voters all day. So you'll get a sense pretty quickly of where things are in, where things are out, and how things are going if you hop on over to BangorDailyNews.com/elections.
Yeah, I was trying to quickly pull it up here while we got it, because all right, there's at least your page. So and you just click on this banner. Actually, I'll point it out. This banner right there is what Mike's talking about. You can click there and it'll take you to some results that are pouring in. I warn you, I did not type in my password yet either. So this gives you an idea of what we should always warn people early on. These precincts that tend to report quickly tend to be small precincts, because it's easy to count a small number of votes in your precinct. So I always warn people when they start seeing results in the very first wave of results that can be very, they can skew things pretty easily because you got to know where those are coming from. And, a district like Bangor may have obviously a lot of voters, whereas a district in Oxford County, there may be one district there maybe has like 50 votes that they have to count. So that's the caveat. But yeah, already, as Mike mentioned, their website already populating some of these results coming in. In fact, this one coming in from Rangeley. So there you go. Rangeley giving us, actually, why don't I go ahead and, I had a result there for a moment. There we go. In Rangeley, I'm going to try and click on that and see what. I don't know.
Each town we've got in is no on everything, but is yes on everything but 3, and then no on 3 every single town. So
yeah, I think that might be throwing my own caveat aside for a second. That could be a preview of what we could expect tonight. But a long night ahead. Hey, Mike, thank you so much. As always, it's great to talk with you, and I always appreciate you. And as for those who are viewers of us and our political coverage, obviously, Mike, my partner in crime when it comes to our debates. I've been doing that with me for a number of years now. So really appreciate it, Mike. Appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All righty. That'll do it, folks. That is it for our live stream tonight. We really appreciate you tuning in. Again, stay with CBS 13 and Fox 23 throughout the evening and our website, WGME.com. And of course, for results as they come in as well, go to BangorDailyNews.com. Just click on that banner. You can go right to those result pages and get those numbers as they come in as well. All right, Mike, great to see you. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and have a great night and a great Wednesday ahead as well.